What's going on, fam? Welcome to the Get the Bag podcast, episode 35.
Yeah, let's
We're
go.
getting up there. What's going on? It's your girl, Gladia Castro. Got my co-host, Tim Park. And today's
Hey, fam.
episode is an extension of what we've been talking about. But before we get into that, uh, of course, like this video, subscribe, follow us on Instagram. We do have our Instagram handles down below. And then for this podcast, our Instagram handle is get_the_bag podcast. So we're at part 3 of a 6-part series. So the last couple of weeks, we talked about administration, and the last one was marketing. So we're kind of touching bases on the 6 aspects or sectors really of running a real estate wholesaling business. And we're now on the third, which is lead
Hmm.
management. This is probably one of the most important. It's really straightforward, but it's probably one of the most important sectors of a real estate business, because this kind of allows you to get deals this
Right.
way. People do not follow up. That's just the struggle, and they always say, right, the money's in the follow up.
Hmm. Yeah,
You
absolutely.
have to follow up. So we're going to break down different sections or different aspects of the lead management. What does it even mean? How can I kind of start if you've struggled with lead managing or just kind of following up with your sellers? We'll kind of break down some things that we've learned along the way. But yeah, what's I mean, starting out, to be quite honest, I always thought when I got into real estate, it was like I have to um I'm just going to focus on marketing. Like
Hmm.
that's what's sexy, right? Like
Yeah.
nobody really kind of, I mean, I think now maybe it's becoming more popular, but nobody really is like, yeah, follow-ups, or it's always like, yeah, marketing, let's market out to this, let's create this campaign. Everyone focuses on the fresh leads when there's plenty of money
Hmm.
in, sitting in your CRM, if you only follow up. So that something you struggled
Right.
with starting off, Tim?
Yeah, I think lead management gets in lost in the weeds when you first start because you're just so excited on just making the phone calls, marketing, and seeing what list that you can actually purchase. And so when you're in it and making these calls, you're not really thinking about the follow up or thinking
Right.
about um, a lead management system at that time. And I think it's crucial, even at the beginning, to have some kind of system for lead management and a follow up process for yourself. And you know, finding a way where when the seller wants to get a hold of you, and whether they leave a message or leave their email, whatever the case may be, or text message,
Mhm.
what's the steps on kind of getting back to them or getting back on the phone with them and contacting them. So all of these are very important aspects, well, the most important aspect of you know at least the wholesaling process.
Right, right. And it's a whole process. Like, of course, we want to get leads, so you want to,
Hmm.
focus on marketing and start getting your funnel, your pipeline, because if you're only focusing, like, I mean, you can definitely close deals if you just focused on just pumping out campaigns, cold call campaigns, SMS campaigns. But
Hmm.
once you start like marrying the two together of like your marketing and your lead management, you'll start seeing like, oh wow, I have a whole pipeline of
Hmm.
leads or follow-ups. I think because people don't have the patience.
Mm.
They, like, I've heard of people that have followed up for 4 years. Like,
Mhm.
imagine calling somebody, a couple times a year for 4 years. Like, do people really have the patience to do that? Doesn't
Right,
seem like
right.
that's the case.
Mhm.
It's just not, like, we keep talking about this, right? The instant gratification. Nobody wants to delay. Like, you have to, I mean, like I've said earlier, the money's in the follow up.
Yeah.
And I think we know this too, but it's just making the time. Like it takes a lot of time to sit there and call your follow ups.
Mm-hmm.
And what would you consider a follow up? Like something that would the lead manager would call.
I think initially someone that's really kind of says, no, I'm not interested right now. Like that's definitely something that, or they may have more than one property and they have tenants in those properties. So those are definitely follow-ups afterwards, because anything really can happen in the time frame of, hanging up the phone, or a text message at that time to follow up with that person in a week or month or a
Hmm.
year. The consistent contact. I have one guy that I've been talking to for over a year now.
Hmm.
He had 4 properties. He had to short sell those properties. So now he's in a position where he wants to, get rid of his last house. So that was
Mm,
kind of a year process. And it was this constant follow up for a whole year, and building that, you know, rapport with that seller.
right. Yeah. I mean, if so many people I know have gone through, how many deals, like if you were to look through your CRM, like, cause we've all struggled with managing our leads or following up.
Mm-hmm.
Like I probably know a handful of leads that have closed, because I didn't follow up, or they went with
Mm,
somebody else because I didn't
yeah.
follow up. And that's, again, that's just money you're leaving on the table. So, when it comes to lead management, it can be a factor of different things. So obviously it's following up with leads.
Mm-hmm.
It could also be answering inbound calls. So if you have like a system set in place, whether it's SMS or cold calling, where it's like you forward it to a specific number,
Mm-hmm.
that's your follow up number.
Mm-hmm.
You have somebody answering the inbound leads to be like, oh yeah. Especially as you start maybe scaling, you maybe want to do some Facebook ads, whatever the case may be. But the main goal of the lead manager is to kind of prep the seller and kind of identify which bucket do they belong in. Are they still a cold lead? Are they still a warm lead? Or are they still a hot lead? And to kind of sum up, a cold lead is just somebody who's like, I'm not really interested. I may sell in 5 years. They're a cold lead. They're not selling anytime soon. Warm
Mm-hmm.
lead is like, okay, yeah, maybe in the next 6 months. It's a little. They are interested, but it's just not. Like right now, so to speak. And then hot obviously is like the next 30, 60 days. Yes, I need to
Mm-hmm.
sell. This is my reason. So it's up to the lead manager. And for many of us who are solopreneurs, we're kind of, we wear different hats at different stages. So sometimes we're the cold caller, we're the VA in a sense. We're also we do the marketing, we do the administration. We're also the lead manager, we're the acquisition manager, where we wear different hats at different stages. So when you're kind of going through this on your own until you hire out, you can start identifying by checking it in with these sellers, like, okay, they're not ready. Because you never know, life happens. I've ran
Mm-hmm.
into the case where one that I did get under contract, maybe, and if I check my record, I can see that I reached out to them in 2021, like towards the end of 2021, through I think a cold call or SMS, I can't remember. And she was like, "Yeah, I'm not sure. I am thinking about selling." And then I put I put them in. Just recently, I ran like an SMS follow up
Mm-hmm.
campaign, a drip
Mm-hmm.
campaign, and she reached out. She's like, "Hey, I'm ready to sell." And like, I didn't really have to do much, and which is
Mm-hmm.
why I love SMS. But sometimes, depending on the record. But this is kind of what I mean is like, you just never know, life changes. So if you're not following
Absolutely.
up and creating rapport, and really developing, nurturing these relationships, nurturing these leads, it's going to be really hard, because you really want the seller to you want to stand out to the seller. You want to just, even if it's just a call, to be like, hey, I'm just checking in with you, see how you're doing. You're looking at them from, from that perspective. You're looking at them as a person, as a human.
Hmm.
And, like Ashley says, that follow-up process is so critical. Um, if you don't have that in place, it's going to be really hard to scale. So that I feel like that's
Yeah.
always the biggest struggle with anybody starting out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once you put the kind of the lead management process into your business, I think it's going to kind of jumpstart your wholesaling business to another level, because now you have a system in place, and you have how you're going to follow up with that person, put in them
Hmm.
in different buckets. And then whether it's a follow-up phone call or a text or different campaigns that you put them in. And, you might do all your follow-ups when you first get on the phone or when you first
Hmm.
get on the computer, and then do your regular cold calling or manage your cold callers, after that. Right. So
Right.
it's just all depends on how you structure it. But at least if you have a system in place, then it's going to help your lead management and you closing deals a lot faster with the follow up.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly it. Everyone, like, if once you start getting like a pipeline in, like consistently like marketing to, a list, you should have enough leads to follow up almost every day. Like people always have asked me, or I remember like learning stuff. People are like, when should we follow up? Like
Hmm.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or once a week. And people are like, you should follow up every day, like at some point. And I have it in my CRM where depending on like their response. So if it's like a cold follow up or if they're not interested, I have kind of like a short term flow and then a long term. So it's like short term is maybe like I'll reach out in like 30 to 45 days just as a check in. And I have this in SMS too, but when I niche down and like I kind of cold call them individually, a much smaller list. I have it where it's automated where if I just set a status, it creates a sequence and creates a task for me. So then in 45 days, I have a task waiting for me. So that's just kind of it accumulates where maybe some days you have a fuller set of tasks to follow up on, or maybe
Hmm.
others, so this is why like organization is so key too. So like beginning of the week, I kind of look at my tasks for the week, what I have set, and I'm like, okay, Wednesday's a really like busy day for follow-ups. Let me organize my day because I still have a 9 to 5. So it's like maybe I won't push a heavy SMS campaign because I know I'm going to be managing that too. So it's all like balancing it out. But the main focus is to keep your pipeline full. And as a lead manager, you're kind of I think I learned this term, like you're kind of the setter when you look at like
Hmm.
volleyball. You have
Right.
somebody who's like pushing the ball to you, and then as the lead manager, you're kind of setting it to the closer if it's ready to go.
Hmm.
So you're really just kind of checking in with them, see how everything's going. You're nurturing the lead, and once they're ready, they've already kind of understood your process because they've checked in with you consistently. Now they're like, I really like how you guys do your things. I think I'm ready to sell. And then you can push it to the closer. But sometimes you're kind of that person too. So
Right.
that's where you're switching hats. So it's a good way to look at it that way, where it's all about nurturing the lead. You're
Hmm.
qualifying it on every call. You're asking like, and it can be as simple. It doesn't have to be a long conversation. It can just
Yeah.
be a
Yeah.
couple of minutes and just be like, "Hey Tim, how's it going? Oh, hey, it's going well. Hey, just seeing how things are going. And you mentioned last time that you had surgery. How's that go? Like again,
Hmm.
this is why having a CRM where you take notes. You're like, yeah, well, I know we talked about this property here, just checking in to see if anything's changed. And then they can be like, no, well, call me in a month or so. Call me in 2 months. Then I can coordinate my task off of that. So it's just having a regular conversation. It doesn't have to be technical or anything like that. It's just kind of a check and call.
Yeah,
I just try
definitely.
to
Yeah.
keep it simple.
No, you have to, because the conversations are short and sweet unless they're ready to go forward. Then you get into the weeds of everything. But the
Right.
follow up in that process is like crucial. Like kind of like Ashley mentioned earlier, is that that process is great, because once you build that rapport, and then you're ahead of the game when you follow up more than someone else does, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now the seller knows you by name when you call,
Right.
you've built that
Or
rapport.
saved your
And
number.
exactly. And when you call them, they say your name. Hey, Tim, how are you
Right.
doing? Blah, blah, blah. I'm still working on, my finances or my personal issues. And, I'm almost there yet. I was like, great. I just wanted to, tap in to see how things are going for you and the family. And, just kind of, just like you said, nurture that whole
Mm-hmm.
process. I mean, even if it takes months or like years, you know,
Right.
that lead will turn into something, or they may refer you to someone else too, because
Right.
you've built
Right.
that rapport. So you just don't know how that deal or that particular seller is going to provide you with some value, whether it's selling their home or someone else's home as a referral as well too. So
Absolutely. I mean, Ashley said it best here. Too many sellers I talk to ask, "Will you call back?" Because these others never follow up. I mean, this was me when I first started, where it's like, "Yeah, I'll give you a call back," and then just
yep.
stuff just happens, or it just slips through, or maybe another lead came in, so that's what you prioritize. But like Tim said, you're ahead of the pack if you're following up. Like you'd be surprised, so many people do not follow up, and this is where it's like treating it like a business, right? Like if you treat it like a business, you understand like, hey, this is an important, crucial part of my business that if I don't follow, I'm not going to close deals. So it's so important to at least just start a simple process, even if you don't follow up every day. Like just start a process where it's like, all right, I'm gonna dedicate an hour. I'm gonna dedicate, however long for follow ups. And I think people just overthink it where they're like, I don't know what to say, or
Hmm.
how am I supposed to handle it? Like all of a sudden they just don't know how to talk to sellers, where you're like, but you're cold calling. Like it's just no different. You don't necessarily have to go through the script again. But you have to imagine like these sellers are talking to so many people. So you have to find ways to stand out, like you said, where it's like, hey, they'll know you by name, they'll save your number, and they kind of like feel comfortable with you. And you obviously don't want to be too pushy, but you want to ask the right questions to kind of get them thinking, and just understand the type of sellers they are. But that's all it is just having a conversation. And even like for people that are like, well, I have so many people that said they weren't interested, I haven't called them in over a year, call them back again.
Yeah.
Like create a
Yeah.
campaign. That's one thing I did recently where I didn't have my process set up to the T as I do now. So what I did is I did two things. I did like a more niche down, not
Hmm.
interested, and then I did like an SMS because I think I was in the middle of like switching systems. So the way I've kind of worded it was like, these are people I haven't talked to in over 6 months, and they're not going to remember me. So I just kind of lay out like, hey, yeah, you spoke to my rep, over 6 months ago about your property, just checking to see if anything's changed. And people are like, I don't remember, or wait, what's your name again? I'm like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, this is, so and so. And so that kind of breaks the ice automatically. I'm not like coming in with the usual, like, hey, is this so and so? Are you
Hmm.
the owner? Like I already know they're the owner because they were labeled as not interested. So go back to these leads or go back to these follow-ups and create a campaign and see what you find. I guarantee you'll find a lead somewhere in that. And even if they say like, no, I'm not interested right now, or at least you got an answer back. That's the biggest thing, is you want to get some form of reply back from the seller. um and it's also kind of asking too, of like, if they're ready to sell, you kind of can go in there and start that process of that conversation. But I mean, that's all it is, guys. Like,
Yeah.
just follow up, start that conversation, and just see where it takes you. You just never know. I think people talk themselves out of it. That's the
Yeah.
biggest hurdle.
Yeah, 100%. I think, like you said, like if you guys have been calling right now and then haven't followed up, just go back to your list and follow up on those people that, said that they, not right now, or, put them into, I don't care if it's a spreadsheet or, write them in the notebook or whatever you got to do to keep track of these leads initially. Then, because when I first started, I had a notepad and I would just start writing things down and then checking people off. And that was before I kind of created my own system and,
Mm-hmm.
on my computer and everything. So do something that works for you initially when you start and what you're comfortable with. Just create something to where you're actually following up. Because if you've been calling for a year now, I guarantee, like you said, if you go back and start reaching out to those people, especially now, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's going to be beneficial for you to, you'll find it, like you said, find a deal in that
Right.
stack. So
I guarantee you'll find something. There's so much money. Like if you just look at your CRM, even if you have like a free Podio, you have thousands of money in there. You just have
mhm,
to like follow up.
yep.
But like I always think like why is it so hard to follow up? Like why is it something that we don't prioritize? I think either we have to learn the hard way where it's like, hey, we let a lead let go, or close with somebody else.
Mhm.
Or that's always the worst part, right? When you've been following up, you've been nurturing the relationship, then you're like, oh yeah, I have it under contract or I sold it. Then you're like, I just talked to you, like,
Yeah.
And so I think the biggest thing is also the sequences, like how often should I be following up? And that kind of varies on again, like how you qualify the lead. So obviously that first conversation you have with the seller, you have to really like ask the right questions and get a feel for their situation. If
Mhm.
they're saying, oh yeah, my family's in the house, yeah, like Fran said, that's a slap in the face. I think I even made an Instagram of it, like, hey, don't mess with me, girl. Like I said, I did something. If you guys go on my Instagram, because it do hurt. It feel like a breakup. Like, damn, I thought we were tight,
I know, right?
But it's always the sequences. So it's like that first conversation you have with the seller. It has to be like, well, what's your, the four pillars, right? Like, what's your motivation, the condition,
Mhm.
timeline, price. If you don't have like, all four of those, then they're not really a hot lead. They're most likely a cold lead, maybe warm. So that's kind of what I factor in. So it's like if they're a warm lead, maybe they want to sell within 6 months. I'll follow up with them maybe every 45 days. If they're a hot lead, that means they need to sell within 30 and 60 days, as I mentioned earlier. But it's also the situation. Are they like, hey, I'm behind on my payments, or I'm going through a divorce and this is what I'm dealing with? That you don't want to wait 45 days. Maybe you want to, every week or every other day, you want to check in, even if it's through text.
Mhm.
And I've always been told to, like, if the seller says, call me back in 30 days, you always want to cut that in half. So they say 30 days, let me call them back in 14 days, or even like a text where it's like, hey, just thinking about you, hope everything's well. um you know just remember, we're ready we're ready when you are. You just want to like kind of put something in the seller's mind of like, okay, this person isn't going away. um but that's kind of how you'll start learning of like the sequences. And so I think it's really great having a system at some point as you start kind of, closing a deal here and there. Is like you need to have a CRM where you can easily track, because like you said, when you started you were using a notepad, but that's not sustainable either. At
Mm-mm.
some point you move to Podio.
Mm,
There's a
yep.
ton of free resources out there. Just pick one. And as you start getting leads, you have to know where to store them. And so that's where you can slowly start, creating a process of how often, and just be consistent with it. I've noticed night and day once I start being really consistent, like this year, like people are actually answering the phone. I'm getting conversation, like, longer conversations. Just, I think people just talk themselves out of it again. So, um, lead management is probably one of the most important, I think, sections of or sectors of a wholesaling business. And I actually think, I don't have a VA at the moment, but I think a lead manager is actually going to be my first hire, because I have so many follow-ups, and it is very hard to keep track. I mean, we talked about it too, Tim,
Mm,
because you're juggling with bigger deals, and sometimes it's hard, for your wholesaling business. Things fall through the cracks.
right.
So if I can have somebody kind of manage that aspect, like a lead manager slash admin, to kind of take care of that. And if I kind of have my SMS set up, It's something that's sustainable and I can kind of gradually add. But people usually go straight for a VA or a cold caller, which you definitely could. But I think a lead manager, for me, I think makes the most sense. Obviously, everybody's situation's different, but I think that's probably one of the most important
Yeah.
hires.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think we're a little bit seasoned, so like we have a lot of like
Right.
data and follow ups and things. So I think that makes sense in our business to have someone that kind of manage and nurture those past leads that we've called personally, and then also we may had someone else call at some
Hmm.
point. But you never kind of get rid of those leads because there's always something that might happen like in the future for that particular
Right.
seller. I think someone that's first starting out, I think you'll have to be that person that follows up and um, puts a system together. And maybe this could be a future podcast where we maybe set up a system for you for your lead management, right? So
Right.
I think it's that important for people that are starting out to understand that the lead management is crucial in your wholesaling business. And
Absolutely.
so I went from Notepad to Podio just because we learned from kind of Chris Jefferson and his group on how to manage your leads and
Hmm.
what platforms you can on a budget basically, right? And then
Right.
you
Right.
kind of gradually go up, like you have REI Sift, and a lot of
Hmm.
people have um, batch leads, and so there's a lot of different platforms that can help you manage it, but you
Hmm.
do need someone to help you when you get to a certain point for sure.
Right. Yeah, that's where like investing is key. And one thing I've started doing, because I'm heavy on like the SMS, bulk SMS, because of time, and I don't have time to sit on a dialer. So I just do big SMS. And one thing I've started doing is I keep a lot of my follow ups in SMS as long as I can. And so this is where you start learning and maybe talking to other people too, of like who do the same thing, the same sort of marketing that you do. So it's like, if I know somebody that's found success in SMS, I'm like, hey, what kind of drip campaigns are you doing? And so if you have it automated to the point where certain responses, or certain depending on the responses, you maybe add certain tags that then trigger them or put them in specific buckets. So again, if it's somebody's like, oh, I need to talk to my lawyer, okay, I'm gonna put them in a specific campaign. Or I'm not ready to sell right now, I'm interested but
Hmm.
I'm not ready, I'm gonna put them maybe in a short term follow up that follows up with them, and you let the system kind of do it. Now you do have
Exactly.
to audit the messaging, because sometimes the messaging gets triggered by carriers, so you have to be very specific with the terminology used. But once you have that set, like the system is doing the work for you, and then you're only getting them on the phone or pushing them as a hot lead or whatever once they say they're ready to sell. So that's where you're letting like the efficiency kicks in, where you're not having to do so much and cold call everybody by hand. Sometimes
Hmm.
you do. Not everybody has mobile phones. Maybe for the hot leads, it probably makes sense to follow up by calling. But for the most part, my goal is like, let me just keep it in the SMS system as long as possible, and have the system do its job for me. And then they'll respond back once they're ready. Like, some can follow up with them every 15 days, every week, maybe depending on the situation. If it's a long term, maybe every like 3 to 6 months. It's just a text being sent out. I didn't have to do that. So as you start scaling, you and I think it's something that we learned too. After every closed deal, you should be investing in some form of efficiency to get yourself out of the business. So as you start closing more deals, you have to find ways to gain back your time so you can focus
Hmm.
on other things. So these are the kind of things that we're talking about. But starting off, of course, like use a notepad, Google Sheets, whatever it is. But the goal is like kind of eventually getting your way to scale if you want to treat it like a business. So um, yeah, this is such a key part of this. And
Yeah.
um obviously it's always a work in progress. It's not perfect. My system isn't perfect. You
Yeah,
just
mine
gotta
either.
be automating it.
Yeah,
But
it's I think we're kind of winding down here, but
mhm.
uh, can you speak to some of like the KPIs that you currently have with your lead management and how you track some key performance indicators for your business?
Yeah, so for there's something I recently started doing for SMS specifically. I've been doing it for my more niche down campaigns or lists that I call. But one of the things too is like keeping track of my follow up. So for every message that I send out, I start keeping track of that and on a weekly basis, and then seeing like, okay, out of how many people that I sent a message to, how many said they weren't interested, or they're not interested right now, or they're interested in the long term. So I'm able to keep track of that, so I can kind of see, start catching like not a rhythm, but like a trend in what I'm seeing. So that's one thing I started doing as well. But also keeping track of the follow ups that I do by hand as well. Like, okay, I have 10 follow ups. Out of those follow ups, how many did I get a contract for, or how many said they're still not interested, or you know it's possible they may be like buzz off, like don't ever call me again, and so they turned into a DNC. So I keep track of those. I started keeping track of those things because it just kind of gives you that visibility too into like your data of like, okay, because then you can have that knowledge when you hand it off to somebody. I think that's
Mm,
always the biggest thing. So that's something I'm keeping in mind, where it's like, okay, if I were to have a lead manager, how would I want them to track? And so now I've started doing it so that I can easily hand it off.
that's a great way to think about it, because then you can you're putting a system in place without really, thinking about it, because,
Yeah,
you're thinking of how would someone that I hire, what would I look at to see how things are performing on the lead management side. So that's
right.
awesome. I love that.
Yeah, what are some things you're kinda doing?
So on the KPIs for that is it's very similar to what you're doing currently, and just kind of tracking how many um, follow ups I do by phone. I don't do text messages. That's
Mhm.
just I'm a more of a phone person and
Yeah.
talking to them. So I just kind of keep track of that, and then I put them in kind of buckets, like short term buckets compared to
Mhm.
long term buckets. And you can already know from the seller that you've built some rapport after a few phone calls that you followed up
Right.
on what really bucket they belong in. And so, like my guy that's a year, I knew that was long term just because he had so many properties that he was trying to, um, you know, get out of because he was
Mhm.
behind on the mortgage. So I was also just helping him and providing value on different resources he could use to get out of his situation, right? So that's
Mhm.
another reason, you kind of follow up and build rapport and try to solve. It might not be the house issue. It just might be another issue that you can give
Right.
that person advice on. So, and then, taking notes, a part of the KPIs as well too, is like how much information do I have on each person. So I look
Mhm.
at that as well, because you know if I'm taking a lot of notes on that, then I expect my VA to take a lot of notes on that, so
Mhm.
everybody's kind of informed on each follow up that happens too. So I think that's
Right.
that's very crucial of keeping track of that as part of your KPIs. It's just a smaller indicator, but it makes sure that everybody's on the same page if there's a different touch point for that seller.
Right. Yeah, I like that. It's like, you're building habits in yourself that you wanna pass on eventually to
Right.
a VA. And it all starts with you. Like, you don't have a boss when you're the business owner to, like, look up to tell you what to do. It's like, it starts with you. So if you're, start creating bad habits from the get, it's not gonna end well because of that. So it's just kind of taking it one process at a time. Like, you're gonna wear different hats throughout the, wholesaling process, but take some time to focus on, like, we've already talked about the administration side. Focus some time on that, and then we've talked about marketing. Focus some time on that. Little bits in time. Now we're talking about lead management. Now start like dedicate maybe 30 minutes to an hour to think about how can I improve my lead management? How can I improve my process, my follow-up process? And then, the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about acquisitions, dispositions, transaction coordination or coordinator. So those are all key parts, but it's something that you want to become an expert because it starts with you. You're eventually going to hand it off to somebody, until, you bring someone on, it's all on you. So, just something to think about. I really hope that you guys got a lot out of this. And feel free to reach out to us if you guys have any questions or, want to ask us any specific tips. But we hope, this specific episode, you guys got tons of gems from it. But anything you want to leave the crew with before we take off?
No, yeah. Well, my thing is this is just part of the process, and this is one of the most important processes in wholesaling. So this whole series is just based off of giving you information on making sure that you run your wholesaling as a business, right? Instead of just getting into it. So these are all gems that we're kind of letting you guys know that you can utilize in your business and expand your business. So even, no matter what, you're just starting out or you've been in it for a little bit, all of these things will help you, become and close more deals too. So.
Awesome. And please make sure if you guys haven't followed up with your leads, start following up with your leads and come back, comment on here or comment on our Instagram and tell us if you've gotten any new leads from these not interested follow-ups. Because I've noticed night and day difference just
100%.
starting to just calling back people who said they weren't interested, especially in this market. People who said they weren't interested and now they're interested because, oh man, I can't sell my house for, X percentage now.
Right.
They're going to be saying that, but appreciate you, Robert. Appreciate the love.
You.
We'll be on here every Wednesdays, but yeah, let us know how those results go. Appreciate you guys for tuning in again. Don't forget to follow us on IG at Real Estate Gladia, at Mr. Tim REI. Like, subscribe. We're on IG for the podcast, get_the_bag podcast on IG. But love you guys. Thank you guys for your support. We'll catch you guys next week. We'll be talking about acquisitions. So we're talking about closing them deals, getting that money.
We go. Action.
Yeah, that's right. That's where the magic happens. Cool. Y'all have a great day. Talk to you guys next week.